The Cabin in the Woods, movie review. So I saw this movie a few years ago on Halloween. I was getting together with some friends. We decided to watch a scary movie because it was Halloween. And one of my friends is a film buff. He's really into all kinds of films and film history. And he said that this was his favorite horror film and he thought this would be a good movie for us to watch on Halloween. I had never heard of this film before my friend showed it to us, and I knew nothing about it going into it. Which is the ideal way to experience this movie. This is one of those movies where, as much as possible, try and go into it knowing absolutely nothing, and you will be very pleasantly surprised. So, if you haven't seen this movie yet, turn off this review. Don't watch this review. It will spoil the experience. Go and find the movie. Don't read anything about it. Don't read the blurb on IMDb. Don't read the Wikipedia page. Just try and go into this movie knowing absolutely nothing about it, and it should be very enjoyable. I'm going to continue talking about this movie, though, perhaps on the assumption that the people watching this review have already seen it and get around to spoiling some of those things. So it's a 2011 movie. It was written by Joss Whedon, co-written by Joss Whedon, produced by Joss Whedon. At the time I saw it, I don't think I had a very big appreciation of who Joss Whedon was in geek culture, although he's just become more and more of a big name since then, so I definitely know who he is now. Because I was unaware of all the various surprises and plot twists that this film had, I walked in expecting a normal horror movie and was pleasantly surprised by everything. My friend, the film buff, said, "It didn't blow my mind, but I thought it was very clever." And that would probably be my review as well. Now, of course, this isn't the first self-aware horror film. We've had the whole Scream series, we've had the Scary Movie series, and some of this, at times, did feel like retreaded ground. For example, the jokes about the characters all splitting up when they should be staying together, that joke has definitely been done before. But on the other hand, if done intelligently, there's no reason why another self-aware horror film can't be enjoyable. And I thought this was intelligent. The equivocation of the movie's target audience, with old gods demanding human suffering and sacrifice, was a nice touch. And all the following jokes about pandering to that audience were cleverly done. A few of the plot twists and fake-out endings caught me completely off guard, and I mean that in a good way. The movie teased out its central mystery very nicely. I was thoroughly entertained while I was watching it. The ending was slightly unsatisfying, but it may have been the only possible ending given this scenario. I didn't really like the ending, but I couldn't think of another way they could have done it. Okay, I'm going to get into some random notes here about various nitpicks and observations. Nitpick number 1. The woman at the end of the film says that the scenario is different in every culture and that it's changed over the years, but that it always needs youth and that there must always be at least 5 characters: the whore, the athlete, the fool, the scholar, and the virgin. But these characters clearly weren't present in the scenario they were running in Japan. I'm not sure whether to count this as a plot hole or not. The movie does seem to imply at different points that there are different scenarios being run in different countries, and yet the woman at the end seems to say that it's always the same 5 characters. I don't know, maybe a plot hole, maybe not. It's a nitpick either way. On the subject of the 5 archetypes, I don't know. What do you guys think about the whore? Especially because within the subject of this movie, the whore isn't really a whore. It's just used to refer to a sexually active woman. Part of me thinks, well, that's the joke. That's what they're criticizing. Another part of me feels that maybe the joke wasn't obvious enough, or that maybe it was sort of reinforcing that double standard on the the double sex standard that's usually used in horror movies. I don't know. I'm probably being a little bit overly sensitive by bringing it up. I should probably just accept that as part of the joke and move on. Okay, moving on. It was interesting watching this movie with my friend who's a film buff, because he pointed out a number of things that I would not have caught on my own. He was telling us about Alfred Hitchcock's movies, and he said something that Alfred Hitchcock commonly does is he toys with your sympathy while you're watching the movie. For example, in the movie Psycho, you're watching bad people do bad things, and yet at various points in the movie, it's held in suspense whether or not they'll get away with it. So you're made to feel suspense for the murderer. For example, when he's pushing that car into the swamp, and there's a moment where it looks like the car is not going to sink down, and you're meant to sink. My friend, the film buff, said that the point of that scene is that it makes you feel worried for half a second that, oh no, he might not get away with the murders. I mean, obviously you don't feel sympathy for that character, and yet Alfred Hitchcock is messing with you throughout the movie. My friend the film buff claimed that the same thing was going on in Cabin in the Woods, and he claimed that this was an homage to Hitchcock's technique of playing with your sympathies. So throughout the movie, it's not really clear whether you're rooting for the teenagers in the cabin or the men in the control room. Now, this tension is all throughout the movie. But in particular, my friend pointed out that it's most obvious in the scene in which the teenagers are trying to escape through the tunnel. And there is suddenly a panic in the control room because they forgot to cave in the tunnel. The suspense of the movie is orchestrated in such a way that the viewer is supposed to feel worried that, oh no, the teenage victims might just escape without getting murdered. Now, this is one of those things that wouldn't have occurred to me on my own. But after my friend pointed it out to me, I thought he was right. This film is messing with your sympathies throughout. But that brings me to another point, actually. Speaking of this exact same scene, there was a question I had about the movie, and maybe I missed something. But I've seen it twice now, and I can't figure it out. So if somebody knows what's going on, maybe you could help explain this to me. So, did I miss something? Or was it never explained why the demolition department didn't get the orders to blow up the tunnel? Also, there was that scene at the party. There was that celebration, and Gary is the character played by Richard Jenkins, is talking to the demolitions department, and he says, "You knuckleheads, you almost gave me a heart attack with that tunnel." And Demolition responds, "Like I said, it wasn't our fault. We didn't get the order." And Gary says, "I'm just giving you a hard time. Come on, give us a hug." And another demolition guy says, "No, seriously, that wasn't our fault." And one of the demolition girls said, "There was a glitch. Power reroute from upstairs." Now at this point, Gary knows something is wrong. His face becomes worried, and his tone becomes serious, and he says, "What do you mean upstairs?" He realizes something's wrong, and then the conversation is interrupted by the telephone ringing. Now, I watched this first with my friends. We couldn't figure out what that scene was referencing. We watched it twice. Why was there a power reroute from upstairs? And how, from this brief conversation, does Gary know that something has gone terribly wrong even before the red phone rings? If anyone out there knows and can explain this to me, I'd appreciate it. I couldn't figure that out. Okay, Another question, and this is probably one of those things I'm overthinking, but at the beginning of the movie, they made the comment that they haven't had a failure since 1998. Now, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to pay off later in the movie. They're going to explain what happened in 1998. But again, unless I missed something, they never did. So then I thought, maybe it's a meta joke. Maybe it's a reference to some sort of horror movie that came out in 1998. So I Googled this, spent more time than I care to admit trying to figure out what the in-joke was with 1998, and couldn't figure it out. I'm beginning to think now that maybe it's one of those jokes where the whole point is it's a reference that you can't figure it out. Or am I missing something? If anyone knows of anything I'm missing, let me know. Okay, another point. I'm going to go on a little bit of a digression here and talk about a different movie, which is The Bride of Frankenstein, one of those old Universal movies, which I loved as a young kid, 12-year-old boy watching these movies on cable. And I remember on the American Movie Channel, I had seen the movie and thought it was good, and then I was watching on American Movie Classics, the cable channel. They brought in a film historian to talk about it, and the film historian picked out all these flaws in the film that I had never noticed because I'd been just so engrossed in the experience. I hadn't been noticing all these logical flaws. But the preeminent example of a logical flaw in this movie is at the very end of the movie, the monster says, okay, I'm going to pull the switch. And they say, oh no, not the switch. And then the switch destroys the whole castle. And the film critic said, what is going on with this switch? Is this some sort of European housing design? It just doesn't make any sense that they would have this self-destruct switch right in the castle. And then they don't want anyone to use it. Okay, so you can probably tell where this is going. This is the exact same critique you could make of that red button scene in the cabin in the woods. The red button which releases all the monsters at once. I mean, why would they ever design such a thing? Why would you ever want to release all the monsters at once? And even if you did design something like that, you'd definitely have it under some sort of guard or keep it under password protection or something like that. Unless that's a joke. And maybe this is even an homage to The Bride of Frankenstein. It crossed my mind because this is a movie that's obviously making homages to a whole bunch of other horror movies that came before it. Maybe they did actually have Bride of Frankenstein on their mind when they designed that scene. I don't know. Okay, a couple other notes. I was watching this movie with my two friends, and they kept up a running commentary about the horror movie trope that the black character almost never lives to the end. There are some exceptions, of course. Night of the Living Dead, etc. A lot of the George Romero movies, actually. Dawn of the Dead. But George Romero aside, that does seem to be the cliche. And they were debating with each other how the movie was addressing that cliche or how the movie was subverting that cliche. Now, I kept out of that conversation because my opinion was that the movie was just not interested in that. That the movie was just addressing other things and was just ignoring the cliche of how the black character always dies before the end. My friends were under the impression that there was some kind of subtle thing going on there. I don't know. My friends were also comparing this movie to the stories of H.P. Lovecraft. I regret to say I've never actually read any H.P. Lovecraft. It sounds like one of those authors that I really should get around to reading one of these days, but I haven't. So I can't really comment on that. My friends were saying that the movie was deliberately in the style of H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know. I'll just have to take my friend's word for it, or if anyone is more knowledgeable, you can leave a comment and let me know what you think. Okay, I'm going to finish out here.